We're going to be making a snowy self-portrait. So in order to do this, you're going to need some white paper, a couple sheets of that. You're also going to need some sort of background colored paper. I'd go with a shade of blue of some sort, as well as some glue, some scissors, pencil, markers, and you will need a wet sponge. Additionally, you might want a few extra embellishments like pom-poms. You might want to also use a white oil pastel or a white crayon. Anything you can do to add a little pizzazz and detail at the end of the project, glitter, absolutely anything you feel like adding, paint, whatever. So let's get to it. All right, this first thing we're going to do is we're actually going to be doing some printmaking. We're going to be making a stamp of prints, and what we're going to do with it is we're going to be using the paper we end up making with our stamp to make hats, scarves, the sweater, anything else that our portrait is going to be wearing. So when you are making your patterns and picking your colors, think about that as you're doing it. Think about what colors and what patterns you might want to use for your actual clothing when you get to it. All right, for the printmaking process, you're going to need a foam plate. I have a actual pre-cut sheet of foam, and it's very flat and even, but you can honestly use a foam plate, like literally a plate that you eat off of. That's totally fine. You're going to want a pencil. You're going to want washable markers. It absolutely has to be washable markers, otherwise it will not work. No permanent markers. A sponge of a wet sponge, and you're going to want some sort of heavy white paper. Try to avoid computer paper or things like that. You want something that's a little heavier and thicker, like construction paper, even thicker, nice drawing paper, any of that kind of stuff. All right. So the first thing I'm going to do is start using my plate to carve in a pattern. And a pattern is a line or a shape that you repeat over and over and over again. Now to do this, I'm going to draw directly onto my plate, and I'm pushing down with my pencil to create an indentation. And you'll know that you did it right if you rub your fingers over it and you can feel the texture and then the indentation on it. If you don't feel anything, if it feels very smooth, then that means you need to push a little bit harder. You don't want to push so hard that you actually cut through the plate, because that will not be good either. It'll leave lots of weird holes in your project. So instead, you want to make sure you're pushing down hard enough that it makes an indentation, but not so hard that it cuts all the way through it. If that happens, you just keep moving on and try to avoid doing that again. Now, if you're a little bit nervous about creating a pattern right away and you want to practice a little bit, you can, on a scrap paper, come up with some different pattern ideas. Maybe look at some pictures of different patterns to get some ideas of what you think you might want to do. The other thing I want you to keep in mind is that when you are carving into a plate, when you push down with your pencil, it's permanent. You're making a carving into the plate, and once I do that, I can't take it back. So I can't say, oh, I've made a mistake, I better just erase it. You can't erase these carvings. So once you make it, it's a permanent mark. So that brings the question of, what if I mess up? So let's say I'm trying to make a bunch of squares, and the first one I do and the next one I do, it's like a weird, goofy shape. It's not at all what I wanted it to be. It kind of looks goofy and weird. What do I do? Well, there's a couple options. One, you can just change your design and say, okay, well, now I'm going to have this weird shape in here every other, and I'll just kind of go with it and just kind of keep repeating that weird shape every time. So that's one solution, and just say, okay, well, that's the way my design is now, and I'm just going to go with it. The other option is to try to fix it by covering it up. So the other thing I could do is, instead, if I made a mistake and that's not what I wanted, and oops, I wanted that to be a circle and it doesn't look like a circle, it looks kind of just like this weird wobble, I can redraw the way I intended for it to be and maybe do something different, like actually color it in. So taking my pencil or pen, you can do this in pen, and actually filling it in completely can actually be kind of interesting and cool too. So again, just sort of changing your design and saying, okay, that's not what I intended, but it's all right. I'm going to just change it and go with something new now. You don't need to change your design completely, so if you run out of ideas, you can repeat something you already did somewhere else in your picture and just kind of repeat it again. That way you're not with brand new things constantly. So if you can't think of something new, don't worry about it. Just come up with a way of repeating something you already did, but maybe in a little bit of a different or interesting way. All right, once you're done with your entire plate, once again, just sort of check it over with your hand. Make sure you can feel texture everywhere. Once you're done with that, now we are going to add some color. And once again, it does need to be a washable marker. It cannot be permanent because that will not work on this. So what I'm going to do is take whatever colors I feel like taking, and I'm going to start inking up my plate. And what you want to do is color anything that's still flat. So I'm not going to take my marker and try to color inside the lines where I'm trying to actually get inside of them. That's not going to work. What we want to do is color just the surface of it, and try to be a little interesting and careful with your colors. Try to pick colors that you think go together. Try to pick colors that are going to complement each other, and also try to stay inside some of the spaces. So if you have a space like how I have these spaces that I'm able to color inside, think of it like a coloring book, okay? Don't think about it like you're going over your lines again, because you already drew the lines. This time you're going to fill in the empty spaces with color as if it's a coloring book. So just think of it that way. Now, one thing you do need to be careful about is this ink, when it's on a foam plate, the foam plate does not absorb the ink like paper does. So when I draw ink on paper, paper has a quality to it that makes it absorbent, so it absorbs and sucks in the ink. So when I put my finger over it later, I don't get any ink on me. But the ink on the foam plate does not get absorbed. So when I rub my finger over it, I get ink all over my finger because it is not absorbing into the plate. So you do need to be careful about resting your hand in it so that it doesn't get really messy everywhere. So try to be careful. And you're going to fill in the whole thing from top to bottom. You can leave some spots white, like if I want to leave these circles white, I could, but I think it just looks a lot more interesting if I color everything in. So I'm going to color everything in, and then we'll talk about how to make our prints. Now we're going to be making our print. So we're going to take our plate that you've colored in, and as long as you've colored in most of the white, or at least as nicely as you possibly can, we're going to be ready to do the printing part. So we're going to need our white paper that we're going to print on. This paper I used is scrap paper in order to not worry about getting it all off my table. So you can use the opposite side if you did the same as me, or you can get a fresh piece. I'm also going to put my name on this. This is a good idea to do if there's many people working on this and you want to make sure that yours stands out from everyone else's. I'm going to put my name on the back, and then you're going to want your wet sponge. So I'm going to flip my paper over so I have a nice blank side. My name's on the back. I'm going to make sure my plate is nearby and ready to go. Then I'm going to take my wet sponge. Now this part is the tricky part, so if you mess this up, it's okay. If you make a mistake after this printing process, don't worry about it, because this plate is reusable. You can do it over and over again. Try different colors, try different combinations, and it should be usable over and over again, just like any other stamp would be. So I'm going to take my sponge, and this part's important. We're going to take the wet sponge and we're going to squeeze out some of the water. We don't want a ton of wet water in our sponge. We want it to be a damp sponge, but not a soaking wet sponge. And I'm going to take my wet, damp sponge, and I'm going to wet the surface of the paper. I'm not pushing down on it so I get a big puddle of water, but I want the whole surface to visibly look damp so that when I see it in the light, it definitely has a sort of glisten to it, as you can see from this. You can see the glistening of the wetness of the paper. And so I'm going to make sure it's all nice and damp. Then I'm going to take my print, and I have to do this quickly so it doesn't dry up on me, and I'm going to flip it over and put it directly on top of the wet surface. And I'm going to use my hands to press and push and try to get an even print. I want to make sure all four corners have been pushed against the wet paper, and I want to make sure that I've gotten my center. So I'm just going to kind of rub the back of my plate, and then when I'm ready, I'm going to peel up one corner and reveal my awesome patterns that have been left behind. And you can see most of the ink has left the plate and most of it is now on my wet paper. So this is an example of what a good print would look like. You should be able to see your patterns very clearly. Your print should be vibrant and colorful. Now, if it looks very blurry and sloppy, that is a good sign that you used too much water. So if that's the case, I would ask you to take your paper towel and dry off your plate and just recolor it and try again, this time maybe with a little less water. If you barely see any color at all, it could be that you didn't have enough water. So the same thing would be true. Add a little bit more ink, re-wet the paper or get a new paper, and this time try adding a little bit more water. For some people this could take a few tries, and some people get lucky and get it on their first try. Now we're ready to move on to our second step of our snowy self-portrait. So we're going to set this aside to let it dry, and then we are going to dry this plate off so that we can maybe reuse it in the future, put away our wet sponge, and now we're ready to do the self-portrait drawing step. For this, we're going to be doing a self-portrait drawing for our snowy self-portrait. So I don't need a full sheet. I don't want to make my head too big. So what I'm actually going to do is take my paper. This is a standard 9x12 size piece of paper. But if you only have computer paper, that works fine too for this particular step. We're going to fold the paper in half. That way I'm only using half of a sheet, so I'm not tempted to make my face drawing way too big. If you don't think that you can concentrate on just the half sheet, you can keep it folded in half, or you can just cut it. I'm just going to keep it folded for now. And we're going to draw our portrait in pencil and then add some color using crayons, color pencils, whatever you want to use. All right, in order to do a face, and all we're going to be doing for this is really just our face and our neck. I'm going to start with an oval. Now, if you have a stencil of some kind, something you can trace that gives you a nice oval shape, excellent. If you don't, just do your best to try to draw a shape that's kind of a squished circle, something that maybe looks more like an egg of some kind. If you didn't do a really good job, if you have lumpy, funny parts to it, erase the parts you don't like and try redrawing those parts. You can also draw a few times. Sometimes drawing over and over again helps you to slowly get the shape that you're looking for, similar to if I did this. So drawing the shape a few times until I get sort of a shape that I think, yes, that looks like a good oval, and then I can erase the lines that are not appealing to me, the parts that I don't think should remain. When you do this, I do highly recommend you draw extremely lightly. The lighter you do, the better, so that when you erase, you don't see these pesky erase lines still showing up. So draw it light until you get it right. That's a good motto that a lot of artists go by. After I have my oval, I'm going to start putting my facial features in. So the first thing, and we're not going to do a lot of in-depth about how to do the portrait necessarily. If you want to really follow a very detailed step-by-step on how to do the face in proportion and accurately, I do have a video linked below that you can watch that does show you exactly that. But for now, we're going to talk about the simple principles and just do a very simple sort of cartoony version of ourselves. So first thing you should know is the eyes are about in the middle of the head. So I'm going to draw two ovals about in the middle of my head that I've created, this oval. And I'm going to try to add some details to make it look like eyes. So I'm adding a circle in the middle for my pupil and my iris. Here's my pupil in the middle, that's the little black dot. The iris is the colorful part. And I'm going to maybe look in a mirror or think about what I know about myself and try to add a few more details to my eyes. Eyelids. I also know that I have eyelashes. I very often wear makeup so that my eyelashes kind of stand out. So I might draw some lashes there as well. Eyebrows, everyone has eyebrows. They go right above the eyes. So I'm just going to draw sort of a curve shape that I might kind of make a little bit thicker on the inside and thinner on the outside. My nose I'm going to draw so that it's kind of in the middle between my eyes and my chin. I'm going to have my nose end somewhere in the middle here. So I'm going to draw a couple lines to represent the side of my nose. So I'm going to do like a curved line right here and a curved line right here. For the actual nose, I'm going to draw this funny sort of wavy shape. I'm going to start with a little curve right in the middle. Kind of looks like a funny little smiley face almost. And then I'm going to curve down on either side of that center curve. And then I'm going to add from the lines down 2 curves going this way, which kind of gives us the feeling of parentheses. And now I'm going to draw my mouth. Think about what kind of shape you want your mouth to be in. Do you want your mouth closed? Do you want your teeth showing in a big toothy smile? I'm going to draw sort of a traditional cartoony mouth. So I'm going to have my line for my mouth go up and down, up and down. So it has that classic bow shape, we call it. And I'm going to do a curve underneath. And then a line in the middle to represent the line in between my lips. If you don't like the way your lips are shaped, you can just adjust them and change them. Once again, we're doing a very simplified, cartoony version, so we're not really trying to make this super realistic right now. If you really want to try to achieve realism, check out the video below and you can watch and see how to do a more realistic portrait. Once I have this, I'm ready to add my neck and my hair. So underneath here, I'm going to add a neck. I'm going to try to go from about the width of my mouth, maybe a little wider here to do a neck. Not doing the whole body because we're going to be doing that with our prints that we made to make like sweaters and things like that, but we do need a neck. And now I want to add my hair. Don't worry about hats and things like that. Think about your hair. Do you have short hair? Do you have long hair? Is your hair curly? Do you have bangs or no bangs? What kind of hairstyles? Is your hair up a lot of times? You're someone who wears a ponytail, or maybe you have very puffy hair kind of flowing all over. Are your ears showing a lot, or does your hair cover your ears? If your ears are showing, you might want to draw them. So the ears, you should be drawing the top of your ears right about where your eyebrow is, in that sort of range, and it should end about where the bottom of your nose is. So just kind of look at that and try to get that in the right spot so you have a good size ear. I'm just going to draw this very simple kind of like curve shape like that just to represent my ears. I'm again not drawing a really detailed ear drawing, and I don't have bangs, so I'm just going to draw my hair sweeping down like this with a center part. I'm going to draw a curve above it, and I'll leave my ears out. So I'm going to have my hair going down behind my ears. Sometimes I have my hair long and straight like that. So I'm going to draw my hair like that, very simple. But again, if you want to draw a ponytail, you want to draw bangs flipping up or anything that you want, that is fine. Once you have a drawing that you're pretty satisfied with, we're going to add some color. Once again, think about the colors that you need. What color is your skin? What color is your hair? What color is your eye? All of those details. You can also add things like glasses or freckles or anything else that you think identifies you and who you are as an individual. All right, so I have some colored pencils here. My eyes are blue, so I'm going to use a blue colored pencil to color in the center iris of my eye here. My hair is blonde. I'm going to use yellow to represent that, although blonde people don't really have yellow hair, but that's okay. We're just doing a cartoon version of us, so I'm going to use the yellow to represent that. You might have black hair, brown hair, orange hair. Maybe you dye your hair when you have beautiful rainbow colors in your hair. Oh, I wish I had that. That would be awesome. So anything that you want to add to show who you are, what you look like, go ahead and add it. My lips aren't really red, but I'm going to color lightly with my red so it kind of has almost a pink look because pink comes from the color red. It's just a lighter version. So I'm going to do that. Maybe you could even add a white color pencil on top to kind of fill it in, make it a little bit lighter. And if you're someone like me right now who does not have a wide variety of skin tone color pencils, do the best you can. Usually a lot of color pencil packages come with brown, but not usually some of those other subtle changes in skin tone like peach and other things like that. So if this is the situation you're in, just use that color and just color lightly. You can also pull out a different material. So if I only have brown and your skin tone happens to match that tone, then awesome, lucky day, you get to match yourself exactly. But if it doesn't match, you just do the best you can. So if you press hard, you're going to get a much deeper skin tone. If you press lighter, you'll get an even lighter skin tone. You can also even layer colors together to try to get a color that's going to match your tone a little bit better. So sometimes layering with some yellows or oranges can really change the shade of brown that you've chosen. Or you can completely go with a new material like crayon or something to get a tone that you think better matches your skin. All right, and that's all you need to do for your self-portrait. We all have such different, beautiful, unique skin colors, eye colors, hairstyles, details to our faces. So whatever you need to do to personalize it, make it more like you or something that you see yourself as, that is great. Now is the part where we're going to start combining our parts together. So we have our pattern paper that we made, which is now all dry. For our sweater, for our hats or earmuffs or any other things you want to add, scarves. And then we've got our picture of ourselves. We also have our background paper, which I mentioned you'll need at the beginning to act as the background where we're going to be gluing everything to it. So let's get started by taking our face, our portrait, and we're going to be cutting it out. All right, so as you can see, I cut out my face and my neck with my hair. And I'm ready to try to create a sweater for myself. So what I'm going to do is decide which end I want to use as the part for my sweater. Do I like this half for my sweater? Do I like the top half? I think I like this bottom half. I think it looks very sweater-ish, so I'm going to use this bottom half. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my pencil, or you can take a marker. I'm going to do it in marker just so you can see it a little bit clearer. I'm going to take a black marker and I'm going to draw a line the full length of the bottom of my print right there. And I'm going to make a nice giant sort of like letter D almost. So imagine it as a capital letter D and how it kind of curves down. And I'm filling up the whole space with it. So I really want it to be nice and big. Now again, you could do this with a pencil. You don't need to do this with marker. That way you can erase mistakes. I just did it with marker so you could see it very clearly. Once you make a nice big capital letter D, we're going to cut that out. All right, now this letter D, this is going to be my shoulders and the top part of my sweater. So what I'm going to end up doing is gluing my head with my neck right on the top or maybe right underneath it. And I'm going to be taking my sweater and lining it up with the very bottom of my paper here. And I'll be gluing that down in place. Now to make it look a little bit more like a sweater, I'm going to maybe add a couple black lines here to represent the arms that I have. But before I do that, let's just glue this down in place. After I put glue on the back, I'm going to rub, make sure I get all the edges. Your glue should definitely be on the edges of your paper. You don't need any glue in the middle, although it's nice to have. The edges is the most important part. And to again make this look more like a sweater where it looks like a person is actually wearing it, I'm going to add two lines, one right about here and one right about here. These are my arms. This is the center of my body. Now before I glue my head in place, I want to use my head as a stencil to figure out what kind of hat I need, or if I'm going to wear a headband. So I'm going to take this extra paper. I have all this extra paper to make scarves, hats, earmuffs, whatever I want. If you want to make a hat or earmuff, I'm going to show you how to do that. You're going to take your figure and put it down on top of your paper. Using a pencil is what I recommend, although you can use a marker as I've done before. I'm going to trace around the top of the head here, just the top part. So again, do that in pencil. I'm going to do it in marker so you can see it a little bit clearer of what I'm doing. Remove it. And then right about here, if it's going to be a hat, you're going to draw straight across. And you have another sort of letter D if you look at it from the side. Let's cut that out so we can see what it looks like. Now, if this was going to be a hat, you can see that it very nicely now fits the top of my head. It's not too big, it's not too small, it's just a perfect size. If I want it to be shorter, I can cut it a little bit more, but I could say that's my hat, I'm all done with it. I could instead do some funny shape to the top of the hat. I could have added like spikes or things like that if I wanted to be a pom-pom spiky hat. If instead I want it to be a headband, let's say I don't want a whole hat here, but I actually want it to be a headband, all you'd have to do is draw another line in here. I'll show you on the back what that would look like. You would draw another line like this, cut that out, and it would fit perfectly on the head and make a really nice little headband. I'm going to keep just a hat, I think, because I like the way that looks. And I think that I'm ready to glue these pieces down. Just one last thing, I'm going to look and see if I want to do a scarf. I think that this green piece would make a really nice scarf, so I'm actually going to just cut this out as a strip. And that by itself doesn't look very scarf-like, right? So I'm going to add a few more details to it. Maybe I just want to make it a little bit shorter and add some fringe. Maybe I just want to add a little thick part and then have some thinner parts for the fringe. So I'm going to measure this and decide how wide I need it to be using my pencil. I can draw right on my paper so I know exactly where to cut it. And then maybe I'll cut this in half and make some smaller strips here. Maybe do some zigzag shape at the end. That would look really fun and neat to make the bottom of my scarf. Once you have all the pieces, the kinds that you want, you're going to glue everything in place. I'm going to start with my head. Once again, put glue on the outside edge of your paper. You don't need anything on the inside unless you want to add a little extra. I'm going to put it so my head is at least touching, if not overlapping, where my sweater should be. I'm going to add glue to my hat. And I'm adding some extra pieces for my scarf. Now, if I wanted this to just be a turtleneck, I could leave it like that, and maybe this is a turtleneck instead of a regular sweater. But I'm going to pretend that this is a scarf, so I'm going to add some extra details to show how it's a scarf. Finally, this is all very nice, but the background is pretty empty and boring. So to liven it up, make it a little more interesting, I'm going to use a white oil pastel, but you can use a white crayon, white paint, you could use glitter, anything you want, and I'm going to add some white dots in the background just to make it look like snow, because I do want this to be a snowy self-portrait. And then the last touch I might want to add is maybe a pom-pom, something for the top of my hat, or if I had earmuffs on, maybe I could add a couple pom-poms over the ears if I had the long headband for the earmuffs. If I had some spikes, or if I just wanted to add extra pom-poms to make my hat a little bit more fun, I can do that. Any other details you want to do, if you decide to add a pom-pom, you don't need to use anything special. Regular glue stick's good. You just need to make sure you get a big juicy blob of glue, and then put your pom-pom directly on top and really push it down and give it plenty of time to dry in place. All right, there you have it, your finished snowy self-portrait. completed with a variety of different art techniques. And hopefully you guys had a lot of fun making this. I absolutely cannot wait to see your personal self-portraits and see what kind of creative, fun, beautiful patterns you come up with. Have fun!